Coming to you from the Hudson Media Group studios, this is Talking Politics, and I am the professor, Fernando Uribe. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get started. Here's what I'm thinking about right now. Now, folks, let me be very clear. I've always disliked Chris Matthews for a variety of different reasons. I've always thought he's a blowhard. I've always thought he's sort of very condescending towards his guest, more so against even people he disagrees with. And of course, he's a fan of the Philadelphia Eagles, which we all know is a deplorable fan base. But you know what? Those are all things to dislike Chris Matthews about. And I especially have grown to loathe and even hate MSNBC for its sort of irresponsible journalism, if you can call it that, or even their attempts at reporting the facts on a daily basis. There's a story this week that should really scare you and give you a moment of pause about today's cancel culture, which seems to be running rampant in today's political climate. Now, let me give you some details here to sort of unravel what's been going on and to sort of give you a better perspective about why this story should matter to you. Now, one of the things, again, I've been very, very adamant about on this program, folks, is, and to no one's surprise, I've always denounced the cancel culture that seems to be permeating, again, in our political climate. And to be very honest with you, the ones I have to blame are liberals. They've sort of created this cancel culture here in the country for some time now. Now, listen, I don't want to hear about anyone trying to draw equivalencies, saying that conservatives do the same thing. They might do that, but it's nowhere near as egregious or as sort of top-heavy as it's been with liberals in recent years. Now listen, again, as I've said before, liberals have become responsible for creating a cancel culture. So the idea that we have to sort of walk on pins and needles because anyone's looking to be offended about anything and everything is particular by the American left. And to liberals, I say to you all the time, this is the fruit of your labor, okay? You're proceeding to eat your own, and you should be proud of it, and you should own it because you have created this. No one else is to blame but you. And as much as I dislike Chris Matthews, I actually feel sorry for him because he's become a casualty of today's sort of very toxic and poisonous cancel culture that's encompassing, again, our political climate. Now, let me give you some details here for what happened this week with the recent MSNBC host. Now, the veteran host abruptly announced his retirement this past Monday following an on-air screw-up and some accusations that have been made that he made sexually inappropriate comments to female guests. Now, of course, some of his colleagues at MSNBC, especially Morning Joe, with Joe Scarborough and Mita Krasinski, came to his defense. And of course, they'll do that. If you work with people long enough and you develop a rapport, you'll come to sort of the rescue, or at least to try to preserve the good name of your colleagues. And they vehemently sort of denounced the decision to force their colleague out at MSNBC. Quote, "It was called a moving night," by Joe Scarborough, who talked about Steve Kornacki, who filled in for Chris Matthews shortly after he made his announcement. Now, everybody was left stunned at the network, and of course, they were speechless when sort of taking over for Matthews Monday night. And that sort of has been the schedule for the rest of this week, and I'm sure for the foreseeable future. They'll have some fill-in guests, some fill-in hosts, whatever the case may be. And of course, one of the things that was said about Chris Matthews repeatedly during the monologue by Steve Kornacki and even some of his colleagues that I mentioned before was that he was indeed, quote, the most human TV personality they'd ever known. Well, folks, again, and I've been very, very adamant about this, I've never really liked Chris Matthews. I've always thought he's a little too liberal for my taste, but I'll give him credit. He spoke up when he had to, and he talked about issues that normally most other journalists didn't want to do. Because again, he came from sort of a legislative, sort of background. He worked with then Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill during the Reagan administration, and he's become a fixture in American politics for the last 2 decades. Now, I get it. Listen, I'm not going to excuse him for some inappropriate comments he's made, whether it's been to female colleagues or anything else. A recent interview with Elizabeth Warren was viewed as sexist because he was seen to be a little too aggressive in his questioning of the senator from Massachusetts, or even, talking about a recent win by Bernie Sanders during the primary season. Now, listen, we could all have sort of gaffes and mental lapses. God knows I have them all the time. But one of the things that I don't like is sort of Chris Matthews now becoming another casualty of today's cancel culture. And I get it, folks. The American left, if they don't like something, they don't want to engage you in debate. They don't want to engage you in some sort of discussion. They just want to get rid of you. And we see it all the time, whether it's sending emails to your employers, whether it is trying to boycott sponsors, or just even signing online petitions to get people removed from their workplace. And that's just wrong. And listen, and let me be very clear. Are there some conservatives in today's political climate that are maybe guilty of this too? Perhaps, but it's nowhere near as egregious, folks, as it is with liberals in this country, especially in the mainstream media, whether it's with print media, whether it's online cable news, or whether it's social media. And folks, again, you might say, well, Fernando, you're sort of creating an hysteria out of nothing. No, I'm not. Folks, cancel culture is real. So whether or not it's talking about maybe things in today's political climate, whether it's ideas you have about maybe the LGBT community, whether it's about the fact you don't like political correctness, you can say certain things, folks, without being bombastic, without being inflammatory, without being derogatory. And that doesn't mean that you're wrong to say them. You have the right to. Again, folks, I'm a fan of free speech, and I'm always an advocate for it on this program. As I tell my students consistently, if you believe in free speech, you either believe in it completely or not at all. You don't get to pick and choose when free speech applies or when free speech is appealing to you. There's a reason why the framers made it the absolute first sentence in our Bill of Rights. They knew how important it was, considering the fact that they lived under an oppressive regime with King George and the monarchy in England. So when they put that into the Bill of Rights, they knew that it was crucial to preserve it and to make sure that it endures. And as we celebrate the 244th birthday of this country coming up this summer, folks, it should tell you a lot about where we stand as a country. And as far as I'm concerned, you know what? Free speech has to be, I think, one of the bigger pillars of our society. And the cancel culture is not conducive to it. So again, I bid Chris Matthews a happy retirement. He certainly gave me a lot of evenings that were very thrilling and very entertaining, whether it was talking about a thrill up his leg with then U.S. Senate, Senator and president candidate Barack Obama, or some of the other sort of outlandish and even silly things that he used to say. He was entertaining, at times informative, but for the most part, he was genuine, and I'll give him that. But what I don't like is the fact that he has yet again become yet another casualty of today's awful cancel culture. And folks, as I said earlier, and I say this to all the liberals watching here today, and to some of the liberals online who do this, because I know a lot of good people that are liberals, so I don't want to sort of paint with a broad brush. But the ones that are dominating this narrative, they're the ones ruining our political climate. They're the ones trying to sort of toxify any sort of meaningful discussion. If you don't like something, try to get rid of it. No, try to understand it. Try to at least engage people. That's not what this cancel culture is about. And to many liberals, fellow journalists, or even colleagues in academia, it's you yourselves that are ruining our political climate. It's time to sort of look in the mirror. Instead of pointing the finger, you might need to sort of point the finger back at yourselves. And that's what I'm thinking about right now. On this week's edition of the three-time award-winning podcast, Talk on the Hudson, which you can listen to live every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time from any PC, Mac, smartphone, or tablet by going to www.blogtalkradio.com/Talk on the Hudson, was my regular monthly guest, the distinguished chairwoman of the Hudson County Democratic Organization, the esteemed Amy DeGise. And we talked for over 90 minutes on a plethora of different issues involving local politics in Hudson County, statewide issues, and even the national election coming up this November. And to start off with, here are some highlights you'll definitely find very interesting. First and foremost, we talked about the process that is still sort of under scrutiny here in Hudson County, and specifically with the HEDO, about who they'll be siding with in the upcoming primary, which isn't until June. But of course, many Democrats around Hudson County are curious about what the leadership is looking to do and who they're looking to back. And it seems most inevitably that it'll be the former Vice President, Joe Biden. Let's hear what Amy had to say about this very important issue.
Listen, Bob was right. I mean, this idea, and this is what drives me crazy, Amy, about Bernie supporters, where, they don't like certain labels being applied to their guy. But Amy, at the end of the day, when you appear on 60 Minutes and you say something outlandish, like, well, we can't say everything about Cuba's, bad because they have a great literacy program. Amy, really? I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, come on. Imagine the outcry, Amy, if I said to you, okay, again, I don't believe this, but imagine if I said to you, you know what, Amy, really, Hitler wasn't really all that bad in Germany. He lifted the country out of poverty. He rebuilt the military. Like, if I said something like that, Amy, you'd crucify me. You'd be like, are you, Fernando, are you crazy? Like, how can you make that sort of equivalence? And it seems like the liberal media didn't really give Bernie, I think, the grief he deserves. Because here's a newsflash, Amy. That literacy program was a indoctrination type of program. It was a re-education type of program.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
And it's amazing to me where Bernie tries to sort of play it off like, well, I'm not really this will be my best Bernie impersonation. Well, I don't like, authoritarian regimes, and I think that they're bad, but not everything about Cuba is really bad. I mean, Amy, I get it. You're denouncing authoritarianism, but you're also not denouncing dictatorships. It's like, well, I don't like communists, but I'm not going to like throw them under the bus either. And I think that Bernie supporters don't get that. And I think that's why he's turned off people like Bob Menendez. And he's turned off a lot of Hispanics.
Yeah. The state of Florida. And I think now especially people in their 40s and younger don't necessarily remember that crisis. And, they don't remember how people had to flee the country. I know Congressman Albio Sierras told me a story about how in school in Cuba taught how to assemble and disassemble machine guns. And like what you said, the indoctrination, the reading programs, the literacy programs were all anti-American, pro-communist. And, like Hitler had literacy programs. Stalin had literacy programs.
Yeah.
Doesn't make them good people, of course that they did things that surrounded nationalism in a really bad way. Al Capone gave out soup and coffee during the Great Depression, and people didn't want to rat him out because they were getting fed by him. Does that make him a good man? Does that justify all of the things that he's done? I think there are just some comments that are better off unsaid, and that we need to show empathy to other groups that had to endure this. And you have a lot of people in North Hudson especially that are Cuban American, whether they're, are elected officials or committee people or just community members that do not remember anything good coming out of Cuba. And a lot of them in the future have fled from Venezuela and other dictatorships and authoritarian governments, and they're not having this. And I remember, I think I talked about this on your show last month, going around in North Hudson when I was campaigning to be the chairwoman, using the word progressive and having Hispanic, leaders say, listen, that word doesn't translate well. That word does not mean the same thing that it means to you, and that represents stuff that we don't agree with. So I think Bernie, a lot of his agenda is going to be labeled as a socialist. I know that the new label is Democratic Socialist. All people need to hear is socialist. And there are many uninformed voters and uneducated voters. There are many people who came from socialist nations in Europe and in South America, and they're not having that word. And I understand why he won't separate himself from it, but at the same time, he has to really show how this form of socialism, socialized health care and free education is a benefit to the nation, not a damper. And I don't know if it's really him or mainly his supporters that aren't grasping the negativity around those words.
Without a doubt, the former vice president has a little bit of momentum going into this primary season. With his recent win in South Carolina and, of course, picking up states during Super Tuesday, Joe Biden, again, is sort of leading the pack and, of course, running neck and neck with the senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders. And as candidates are stepping down during this election season, whether it be Michael Bloomberg or even recently Elizabeth Warren, it seems to be a two-horse race in the Democratic Party. And of course, Amy shares her concerns about how other members of the Democratic Party throughout Hudson County are sort of vilifying her even on social media about what direction and ultimately what decision the HDDO will take in supporting the candidate during the upcoming primary. Another highlight for your interest was, of course, her thoughts about U.S. Senator Bob Menendez and what he felt was sort of a very toxic type of environment around U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders concerning his recent comments about Cuba, and overall what Joe Biden needs to do to sort of lead the pack and become the eventual frontrunner and presumptuous nominee to lead the Democratic Party this November against the incumbent president, Donald Trump. Let's see what she had to say about it.
Let's be honest. Joe Biden's probably going to be the mainstream pick here in New Jersey. What would you say?
I would probably agree with that. I think a lot more people are comfortable getting groups on board. I think that the support that he has from minority communities is key. We've seen in past, not only presidential, but local, statewide races, African-American voters and Hispanic voters are so important. And a lot of them will vote, across party lines. So he's been able to grab them. The scary thing is the younger vote, and we want to encourage young people to vote, will counter that. And, they, again, don't remember a lot of these socialist and communist problems that America experienced, but older Americans do, whether they lived in these nations or not. And I think that they'd rather have someone that they feel is presidential or able to beat Trump or just kind of able to do it in a way that he can bring everyone on board. And I don't want that to necessarily hurt the Bernie campaign, because I do think that there are some initiatives out there that he's bringing to the table, and it's really changed the dynamics of the conversations that we've been having. It has highlighted some programs that we've had for a long time, excuse me, like Social Security. That is really a socialist program, and it's one of our most successful programs here. So we want someone to bring progress, but you want to be able to bring it to everyone and have them feel comfortable with it as well. So I think Joe Biden has become the friendlier candidate to that. I think some of the recent rhetoric from the Sanders camp on, defeating the establishment and turning everything upside down is really similar to what people felt when Donald Trump was campaigning. And a lot of Democrats are going, listen, we've had 4 years of fighting. Why do I feel like Bernie is going to be 4 more years? So I do hope that his campaign does some better outreach, especially to groups that they don't have on board now, which are key demographics for voters, our minority communities. And he's not going to grab them with the dialogue that he's using now.
It was a very illuminating and interesting episode with Amy DeGise. And of course, it lasted for over 95 minutes. And you can listen to the episode in its entirety by going to www.blogtalkradio.com/Talking to Hudson. As election season continues to heat up here, specifically for Hudson County residents, whether you are a Bernie Sanders supporter or a Joe Biden supporter, of course, the establishment and the HCDO, respectively, have a lot to answer for in the coming weeks and months ahead leading up to the June primary, and who they will back ultimately as the Democratic nominee to challenge the president this November. And now to some local stories for your attention. First and foremost, let's head down to Jersey City, where the governor and the CEO of New Jersey Transit, as well as community leaders and other advocates, joined together to celebrate an extension of the Hudson-Bergen Light Rail. Now, a great job by Insider NJ reporting this week that the governor, again joined by NJ Transit CEO Kevin Corbett, many Hudson County officials in attendance, as well as labor representatives, highlighted early phases of the construction on an extension project to the Hudson-Bergen Light Rail, specifically on the West Side Avenue branch. Now, the project will add a new station supporting the transportation needs of the community, as well as encourage growth along the Hackensack River waterfront. Now, the governor said in a prepared statement this week, I am thrilled to announce that the West Side Avenue extension of the Hudson-Bergen Light Rail today, as this project represents the type of smart and also 21st century infrastructure that's needed here in New Jersey for its commuters and also for its economic future. Also, the governor wanted to say continued expansion of mass transit is fundamental to creating a more innovative and interconnected state. I look forward to working with New Jersey Transit and, of course, our regional partners to deliver a fully accessible Hudson-Bergen Light Rail system. Now, the current project, folks, under consideration will extend the Hudson-Bergen Light Rail West Side Avenue branch from its current terminal along West Side Avenue to a new terminal directly across from Route 440. Now, the approximate 3,700-foot structure will include one new station west of Route 440 to support Jersey City's planned development to the Hackensack waterfront. Now, the project cost is estimated to be $220 million. And of course, the project is currently in its preliminary engineering phase. Now, folks, I've talked about this on my podcast repeatedly, and while I applaud the extension of the Hudson-Bergen Light Rail, specifically in that area of Jersey City, we need to extend it more northward. Now, one of the things that obviously has come under some discussion, and certainly we have not broken ground yet, is the eventual extension into Bergen County, which will ultimately make it the Hudson-Bergen Light Rail. Now, currently the last stop in Hudson County is along Tunnelly Avenue, but we're seeing and reading about plans that will extend up to 91st Street along Tunnelly Avenue and the shopping plaza there. It will stretch into Palisades Park, Leonia, and eventually its last stop will be at Englewood Hospital. Now, those are great destinations and I think very vital. But what I would argue is that as much as we see the necessity on Route 440, I would argue that we also need an extension of the Hudson-Bergen Light Rail into the southeastern part of Bergen County. With growing development taking place in Weehawken, in North Bergen, in West New York, and even in Edgewater, it would be great to have a route and even terminals along that sort of part of geography, eventually finalizing in Fort Lee. There are so many people that commute to the city. And of course, guess what? If you live in Weehawken, West New York, and even during the current light rail stops, which are in parts of Weehawken, which include the Lincoln Harbor, as well as in Union City along Bergen Line Avenue, This extension, I would argue, would be fundamentally important, folks, for residents and for commuters. So, I mean, I'm hoping at some point, and I've written to New Jersey Transit, I've written to the governor, and I urge you to do the same thing too. Talk to our elected leaders. Talk about the necessity about how this part of the Hudson Bergen Light Rail would be so beneficial, again, to local businesses along the waterfront, in Edgewater, in North Bergen, in West New York, but also all the way up to Fort Lee. Folks, it's a growing population. And again, Hudson County is the most densely populated county not only in New Jersey, but arguably in the entire country. And mass transit is crucial to not just the development of the area, but also for the benefit of our commuters and sort of saving us from the added congestion that traffic presents in the area. Now, again, I would argue that let's try to create more extensions of the Hudson Bergen Light Rail system. Why not have stops going into Hackensack, okay, or all the way into Paramus at Garden State Plaza? Isn't it all we hear all the time, folks, is that the congestion on Route 17 and Route 4 on weekends is overwhelming? Let's alleviate that congestion. Let's create more light rail extensions into those parts of Bergen County where there's a lot of commerce, there's a lot of industry, and there's a lot of labor opportunities there. Why not do that? Now, again, I applaud the fact that Route 440 getting a new terminal. That's also a very busy part of the county. But if you really want to make it the Hudson Bergen light rail system, extend into parts of southeastern Bergen County, as I mentioned before, into parts of Edgewater, ultimately ending in Fort Lee, going into Hackensack, and ultimately ending in Paramus. There's no question, folks, that, having that terminal in Inglewood Hospital would be great, but why not have it along the waterfront, right there in North Bergen? Like, people don't use Palisades General Hospital? Of course they do. It's a popular local medical facility. So why not create more of an accessible light rail system here in this area? I know it costs money, and nobody wants to talk about that. But if it's worth doing here in Hudson County. And I'm hoping the elected officials can hear my pleas, and I know that many residents feel the same way I do. Let's make it the Hudson Bergen Light Rail, and let's extend it as far out as possible to help not only residents, commuters, but New Jerseyans overall. And one of the few times I won't be political on the show, here's a very important community event for your consideration, folks. And this Friday night at the Weehawken High School, and if you were a fan of the 80s like I am, 80s pop icon Tiffany will be visiting Weehawken High School for a benefit concert to benefit the Weehawken Education Foundation. Let me just give you some pointers here because, you know what, if you grew up in the late 80s, early 90s, you knew who Tiffany was. And of course, she'll be there performing her various hits, which include We're Alone Now, and of course, Should Have Been. Now, the event takes place at Weehawken High School coming up on Friday, March the 6th, which is located at 53 Liberty Place. And you know what? There'll be free parking nearby at the Tower and Plaza Mall. And of course, there'll be a shuttle service to the high school. Now, tickets are $40 if you purchase in advance, and there'll be actually a little bit more at the door. But folks, it's a great community event to benefit, again, students and the specific Weehawken Education Foundation. And one of the things that I think really, folks, is that we don't talk about enough are these sort of benefits and how great they are for our students. Okay, and how beneficial it's going to be for them to relive one of the more iconic musicians of the late 80s, early 90s. And you know what? Again, if you loved freestyle, if you loved pop music, you knew who Tiffany was. We all listened to her at some point in time, whether it was our Walkmans, I know I'm sort of showing my age now, but our record players or our cassette players or whatever, or we watched her on MTV when they actually played music videos. But Tiffany was quite the presence in the music scene, and it's great to have her come to Hudson County, specifically at Weehawken High School. So I have to give a shout out to the Honorable Mayor, Richard Turner, the Town Council, and of course, Town Administrator Gio Ahmad for helping make this possible. Folks, it should be a capacity crowd this Friday night again, starting at 7:30 p.m. So you want to get your tickets, you want to get there early because Tiffany and her show is one you definitely don't want to miss. Again, as I mentioned before, proceeds from the concert, all 100% of them, will go to benefit the Weehawken Education Foundation. Again, it's a joint partnership between local parents and the Board of Education created, as I mentioned before, by Mayor Richard Turner to raise awareness about scholarships and how vital they are to our local students. Again, folks, I can't tell you enough about how happy this makes me to see an iconic pop star coming, again, here to Hudson County, coming to Weehawken High School, coming to perform in front of a jam-packed crowd. And you know what? She'll be taking pictures later. She'll definitely be Instagramming. So you definitely want to be there. Tell your family and friends. And you know what? You'll definitely get to relive the 80s, at least for one night, here in Hudson County. And of course, you'll be able to do it at Weehawken High School. Another local story for your consideration, and we'll go to the Mile Square City right now, where there seems to be, to no one's surprise, the ongoing struggle and drama between Councilman Mike DeFusco and, of course, Hoboken Mayor Ravi Bala. Now, this week, as reported by the Hudson County View, so a shout out to the good work done by John Hines, as always. In a letter to the editor, Hoboken First Ward Councilman Mike DeFusco went on to say, quote, that the mayor should be focusing on cutting spending, not people, in the midst of an ongoing budget crisis. Now, here are some facts, folks, from the recent article, again, via the Hudson County View and the letter to the editor. Now, the councilman wanted to say, quote, politics is about people. Making people's lives better is the basis for public service, and making Hoboken run on a day-to-day level couldn't be done without our hard-working municipal employees. Alarmingly, though, it was announced last week that 79 men and women were notified that they could be facing layoffs in the Mile Square City. Now, to no one's surprise, ladies and gentlemen, I know that the councilman has been a staunch advocate of sound fiscal policies, and of course, he's gone on many occasions to accuse the mayor of just overspending and not spending in the right places. Now, again, this can make Ravi Bala very vulnerable as he seeks re-election coming up in November of 2021. But presently, though, whether it's Councilman Mike DeFusco or his fellow council members, they're looking to hold the mayor accountable. Now, again, in the letter to the editor this week, the councilman wanted to say, quote, that the mayor says, of course, that rising healthcare costs are a significant driver on our city's budget, and he's not wrong. But for the last 2 years, the councilman has advocated to switch our city's health insurance vendor to save millions. And unfortunately, the councilman has told us that the mayor has never budged on this. Now, the particular vendor has made statewide news for contributing, let's say specifically, to contributably connected super PACs in favor of politicians who support them. Well, folks, I can't say enough about how this drama does such a disservice to Hoboken residents and taxpayers, but more importantly, to Hoboken municipal employees who work hard every day, whether it's cleaning the streets, whether it's working at City Hall, whether it's, again, doing everything that they need to do to make the Mile Square City work and to work efficiently. Now, we'll see what happens in the weeks and months ahead as the budget crisis in Hoboken is reaching almost a very sort of alarm-like level. As you can see, whether you watch it online, on YouTube, or sort of the live feed with the Hoboken City Council, council meetings are always lively, they're always very sort of contentious, and they become very volatile because the council people are looking to hold the mayor accountable and as well as Hoboken residents. It's become very testy, ladies and gentlemen. It's become a little chippy. Without a doubt, it's become very, very heated. Now, again, I don't know what this letter to the editor by the councilman will accomplish, but he certainly wants to raise awareness about the mayor needing to be a little more fiscally responsible because we're talking about men and women and their livelihoods on the line. We'll see. We'll keep you posted here on the program, ladies and gentlemen, about where these layoffs could come and who could be ultimately affected in the Mile Square City. And without a doubt, the ongoing drama between Councilman Mike DeFusco and Mayor Ravi Bala seems to see no end in sight. And of course, heading into the election season in 2021, it should prove to be at least some very interesting headlines, once again, in the Mile Square City. And that's our show for this week. To check out all the excellent programming brought to you by the Hudson Media Group and NJ On Air, check out their websites, www.hmgtvshows.com, www.livestream.com/HMGTV, and www.njonair.com. Don't forget to like the Hudson Media Group and NJ On Air on Facebook and follow them respectively on both Twitter and Instagram. To check out the 3-time award-winning podcast, folks, you can listen to it anywhere at any time by going to www.blogtalkradio.com/Talk on the Hudson. It's available, again, from any PC, Mac, smartphone, or tablet, and it airs live every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Blog Talk Radio. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, folks, at Professor F. Uribe, and also check me out on Instagram at Professor Fernando Uribe as well. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, this Sunday, it's Daylight Savings Time, so don't forget to set your clocks 1 hour ahead and make sure you're not late to any important appointments. Ladies and gentlemen, never forget, if it's unbiased, unfiltered, and unafraid, you know it is always Talking Politics right here with the Hudson Media Group. I'm Fernando Uribe. Thank you so much for watching.
Don't forget to catch Fernando's podcast at blogtalkradio.com/talkonthehudson. New episodes available every Wednesday night at 9 p.m.